Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Spoonful of Endgames, where we talk about endgames. I share some practical games and theoretical positions with you, and I sincerely hope that those episodes, after watching every single one of them, you get more knowledge that you might be able to apply in your games. So today's topic is gonna be Rook and Pawn versus Bishop. We're gonna talk about some endgames with a side pawn that are hard to win, that are actually drawn endgames. But if you're playing, if you're trying to defend those endgames with the defending side, you really need to know some theory, endgame theory. Before proceeding to the main topic of this episode, I will gladly let you know that absolutely must know endgames video course was just released on chess.com, was recently released, and you can check it out. It has 6 videos. So it's the first part of this course, 6 videos on absolutely must know endgames that as I think you need to know, including one endgame which is quite similar to what we're gonna discuss today. It's Rook versus Bishop endgame, but with no pawns. Today there's gonna be one pawn for the stronger side, and it will be a little bit different. And in this particular lesson and in this video course, I'm discussing mostly positions with no pawns on the board. So check it out if you wish, and let's proceed to today's topic. As usual, we're gonna start with watching a short episode of me playing the endgame that I'd like to talk about today. So let's have a look. Mm. Mama, what have I done? That is a game between myself, I'm playing white, and the French Grandmaster Etienne Bacrot. And as you can see, I'm trying to save the game. I'm playing with white pieces. I have just a bishop. My opponent has a rook and a pawn, but since it's a side pawn and my king is in the right, in the safe corner, meaning it's in the corner of the opposite color as compared to my bishop, so it's a1 and my bishop is a light squared bishop. So theoretically it's a draw, but we both made so many blunders and mistakes. Every single move almost I was making losing moves, and my opponent was not able to win the game, although his position was won several times. So let's see how the game proceeded. It required me quite a lot of moves and effort to save the game. And of course it's very hard to play with just 2 seconds increment. And you can see it in my eyes that it was not easy at all. Mama. Okay, finally.
No, don't do that.
I took the pawn.
Don't do that to me, please.
A3 pawn. But nevertheless, to make a draw according to the rules, I need to make 50 moves. So I need to hold this position for 50 moves. Still the safe corner, and I just recorded videos for chess.com for the video course that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. So I knew the main ideas. And finally, even though that was the safe corner, I decided to escape from this corner and run to the h8 square, which is also the safe corner for the defending side. And this is a draw. You can watch more about this kind of endgame in the video course.
I'm tired.
Chess.com video course. There are some tricks to
Come on,
know
please.
and to avoid.
Any move.
But generally, it's quite easy to hold this draw if you know the basic ideas.
Any move. Where is this 50 moves? I'm tired. Yeah. Whew! I made a draw. I don't want to play anymore. I don't want to play anymore. I'm tired. The tournament is over. Okay. Expect another episode of Spoonful of Endgames. Whew! That was terrible. That was terrible. My hand is tired of playing this. I'm tired. I don't want to play anymore. Can I have a break, please?
Well, you saw it with your own eyes. It was quite tiring to make this draw, to hold this draw, and as I mentioned already, there were quite a lot of mistakes. We'll get to analyzing this game, we'll go over those mistakes, but first let's start with some theoretical positions to make our life easier. As always, I've used mostly these wonderful books that I use most of the time when preparing chess lessons. Of course, it's the Dvoretsky Endgame Manual. Well, I have the second edition, but probably it's the fourth or fifth edition already came out. And a wonderful book by Jesus de la Villa, 100 Endgames You Must Know. So you can get these books and check these positions out. And there are some exercises as well. Those are very useful books to have on your bookshelf. Okay, so let's start with some theoretical positions from these books and from some other books that you can find. And as I already mentioned, we're gonna talk about a rook and a side pawn versus a bishop endgames, where the king of the defending side is in the right, is in the safe corner, meaning that we have like bishop of the opposite color of this corner. And what you should know about such positions. You should know that the closer this pawn to the corner, if your king, of course, if the king of the defending side stands in front of it, the easier is to hold the draw normally. I mean, unless this pawn is already on h7 and it's supported by the king and the rook, then such positions usually are lost. But if the pawn is on h6, then the defending side only needs to get in time with this bishop to the diagonal b1 h7 in that case, to take under control the square h7. So not let this pawn move forward. For example, if white plays here rook c7, then if black replies bishop b3, it's going to be a very big mistake, because the pawn will just get to h7, then king h6 will follow, and rook c8 or rook e7, or the rook will get eventually to the 8th rank, and white's gonna win this game. Also, bishop h7 is gonna be a very serious blunder, because after this move black loses due to rook c8, bishop g8, and here a waiting move, so just wait, rook b8, rook d8, then king h7, the only move. Rook d7 check, king h8, king g6. Here comes the problem. Again, there is no way to stop this h7 move. So black needs to wait on the diagonal, but shall not step onto this h7 square. Bishop d3 works pretty fine. And after king f6, the bishop just holds on this diagonal, going via b1, c2, d3, e4 squares, and that should be reasonably easy to save. I would even say that with the pawn on h6, there are no, I mean, it's even easier to hold the draws than without this pawn. So eventually white will play h7, you will need to take this pawn, and then it's gonna lead to a bishop versus rook versus bishop endgames that I already mentioned, and that again you can check out at my video lesson on chess.com. There are, however, some very beautiful exceptions, as for example this study of Joseph Van Cura, where despite having the pawn on h6, white wins the game. And you can find the following position as an exercise in the Dvoretsky manual. As we already know, black's bishop is heading to e4. If it gets to this diagonal, the position will become drawn. It's gonna be a draw. So in order to win the game, and white wins here, surprisingly, white wins here. In order to win the game, white needs to stop this move, to stop these maneuvers. That's why it's very important to know those basic ideas, because if you are aware of the fact that it's a draw if black's bishop gets to e4 and gets to this diagonal, then in order to win, of course, you need to stop this move, stop this maneuver. And it's easy to stop just by playing rook g4. And surprisingly, white's rook just too strong. It just doesn't let black's bishop get to this diagonal. Again, after bishop b5 with the idea to get to d3, white plays a d4, and we know the winning plan, right? We know the winning plan for white, that eventually if white manages to prepare this h7 move, it's going to be a winning position. So, and if black tries to play king h7, king f6, king h6 is not possible due to rook h4, bishop c6, king g5, and again the same problem that black's bishop is not able to get to this b1 h7 diagonal. King h8, if bishop b5, then rook d5, and some more maneuvers preparing the check on the 7th rank, and then the move h7. And black, unfortunately, cannot stop this plan. If king h8, rook c4, and again we get the same positions that we already discussed, where those pieces are trapped in the corner, and unfortunately there is no way for black to stop the plan with pushing the pawn to h7. So just a waiting move, then a check, and then king g6 and h7. Let's carry on. One more position. Well, that's the position that white has the pawn on h5. It gives white more chances since the h7 square is available for their king. Thus, black needs to be careful. Again, leaving this diagonal is not the right way to play it. Bishop c4 loses here due to the same plans that we already discussed. Check on a8, bishop g8, king g5, and then preparing h6. After king g7, h6 is possible, and then again waiting move, check, and king g6. It's also possible to win a little bit differently by giving a check first, and then by playing king g6, bishop d5, check, rook e7. That's a maneuver that you see pretty often in rook versus bishop endgames. And here king f8 loses due to h6 and then h7, and king f8 loses due to king f6, and then the pawn also marches to h7 and white wins. For me, I think it's a little bit easier to play h6, but rook a7 wins here as well. So if we just back up a little bit, and we know how important it is to keep this bishop on d3, then it's quite checkmate is threatening, right? So rook a8 is quite a nasty threat, and we need to do something about it. Of course, bishop e4, as we know, is gonna lose due to rook e7, and then the rook will get to e8, will force the bishop to g8, and we'll get the same situation when it's not possible for black to stop this pawn's march to h7. So the only move that saves black is king g8. And after rook g7 check, another very important move to remember, and we're gonna talk about this move when we're gonna analyze my endgame against Etienne Bacrot a lot, is king f8. It's the only correct way to save the game, and as we will see, I mean, somehow psychologically, the king tends, you tend to move the king to this corner because you know how crucial it is, if you're the defending side, to blockade this passed pawn with the king, but it's not working here, and actually it loses the game. So in order to save the game, the black needs to get to f8, because king h8, as I already mentioned, loses due to rook d7, rook d8, king g5, then check, and h6, h7. And after king f8, there is no way for white to improve this position. I mean, they can wait, they can try to attack the bishops, they can even play rook g6. The most important thing here is not to take on g6, because we're gonna get black is gonna lose here, so black just needs to wait. White is not really threatening anything, and if the king goes to g5, then it's okay to take, and then it's a draw. And again, so waiting on this diagonal, and after rook f4 check, king g8, and after rook g4 back to f8. So I think that's the most important things to remember about this position. I mean, we can turn the board around a little bit, but it's gonna be still the same, the position is the same, so it's important to keep the bishop on this diagonal. The positions can be a little bit different, but the ideas are always the same. So just, again, changing the flanks, changing the sides doesn't change the evaluation of this position. Same story. Don't get to the corner when the stronger side has a pawn on a5, because it will lead to the position where you're not able to stop this march of the pawn, and it's gonna be lost. One exception to mention: when these pieces are already in the corner and when the position is winning, there is one trick that the stronger side should avoid, and this is the trick that happens sometimes if you go with the rook too far away to h7. Here, for example, rook d7 wins, and then a6, a7. But sometimes, what I want to show you, sometimes if the pawn gets to h7 and your rook is still on a4, then there might be some drawing chances for the weaker side because of the stalemating ideas. Only when the rook is on the a file, on the opposite file of the side pawn. Because in this position, king h6 doesn't win because of bishop e4, and after rook a7, bishop b7. That's what changes the situation. If the rook was on c, d, e, any other lines, it would be winning for white. But since the rook is on a7, that's quite a rare exception, and that made this Another wonderful and beautiful study by Vancouver, Joseph Vancouver possible. It's white to play and win. I'm gonna show you the solution at the end of this video. Now you can pause the video, you can try to figure out the winning method. It's quite difficult, but you know everything already about this position, and you already know that king h6 leads to a draw, so hopefully you'll be able to figure it out. And now let's get back to my game against Etienne Bacrot. I'm gonna start with saying that I had a completely lost position after in the middle game. Bacrot won queen, and he was winning, but little by little, as in blitz games happen quite often, he was letting some part of his advantage slipping away, and we ended up in this position. And this position, as we already know, is a drawn position, and my bishop is beautifully placed on the diagonal where it's supposed to be placed. And bishop c4, I made the move, which is an okay move. I would probably suggest going a little bit further, just not to, get under attack, but okay, bishop c4. Rook b2 check, and here comes the first blunder. I made the move king to a1, and as we already know, getting to the corner here, it's not the right strategy. I should have played king c1, and we get the same position that we already discussed, with my bishop ideally placed on the a8 diagonal, keeping under control this important square a2 and not letting this king get through, and thus preparing this a2 march. And with the accurate play, this game should end in a draw. But in the game I played king a1, and that's a huge mistake. It's the blunder, and the position is winning now for black. And he needed to play rook d2, check on d1, king b4, check a3, king a1, then a waiting move, then one more check, and king to b3. Again, let me pay your attention to the fact that it's very important to play rook g1, rook f1, rook e1, but not rook h1, because it's gonna lead to some unnecessary problems after this in this line, because as we know, bishop e4, a2 is gonna lead to draw. You can try to figure out the right way for white to make a draw. You can pause the video, otherwise I will let you know how white should play. We know that this bishop to g2 idea, but it doesn't work immediately, because after bishop g2 the king will go to a3, and the bishop will need to move away, and thus the rook will go to e2 or f2 or d2, and eventually to the first rank, and will give a checkmate. So in order to make a draw here, white needs to give a check, and then if king c3 isn't just taken on a2, is a drawn endgame, and if king a3, then bishop g2, and surprisingly, this position is a drawn position due to the stalemate idea, and it's just possible because this rook kind of cutting the bishop is able to cut the rook away from the first rank and to cover the second rank at the same time. So it's a quite a rare exception, but you really need to know this exception in order not to let the win slip away. So rook d2, rook d1 was the right way to play, while my opponent played rook c3. It's still a winning position, as we know. He just needs to transfer the rook to the first rank. King b4 he played, and now I could have made a draw by playing bishop a2, and after king a3 played king b1, and thus getting out of this dangerous corner. Instead I played king b2, which is a mistake. He could have just played a3 and push the pawn to a2. He played rook b3, king a1, rook a3. Bishop a2 was the right move to play here. I played king b2, and again the position is lost because here he could have played a3, and we know already the drill. Rook e3 instead he played, and here I made the losing move again. King a1. I was getting to this dangerous wrong corner all the time. Instead, bishop d5 or bishop f7 or bishop g8 or king b1 or even king c2. They all hold a draw. They're all okay to make a draw. Instead, I made this terrible blunder, and again the position is winning for black, and I'm sure by now you will be able find the winning line. There are several ways, but you know the plan. Rook e1, my opponent played bishop b1. Yes, it's a mistake. We know that king b2, king b1 should be played, keeping the king out of this dangerous corner. Instead, I was just I thought that the king is safe there. And you know, of course, I've read those wonderful books that I mentioned several times. I've solved those exercises, but I've never had a chance to defend this position in practice. And for me, it's crucial. I mean, I learned by applying whatever I've heard, whatever I've analyzed in practice. And if I'm not able to, I mean, that's why it's so important to play online and to analyze every single game of yours, because it's very, okay, that's a 3-minute game. Nobody cares. It's not a very important game. But imagine, it would be very disappointing if I would face this position in a World Cup or in some chess Olympiads, and I would fail to hold this relatively easy to hold drawn position just because of the fact that I forgot or I didn't spend enough hours, and I hadn't had a chance to record such a video, because when recording and when explaining those nuances to you, I spent quite a lot of time, quite a few hours preparing for this, analyzing, because in order to explain you really need to know and understand those positions very well. So it's a symbiosis. I mean, it's a mutual advantage. You get your knowledge, and I have a chance and motivation to refresh my knowledge and to be able, when I explain it to you, hopefully I'm gonna keep something in my brain. So okay, let's see how the games proceeded. King c3 again, bishop b1 is a blunder, king b3 again a winning position, rook e1 as we know the winning plan, rook f2 here wins, and here finally again I get the position that I need. My bishop I'm back to the ideal situation with my bishop beautifully placed on the safe diagonal a2 g8, keeping under control those squares, not letting the king open the road to the pawn. And of course, it's very important that my king keeps under control this b2 and other squares that I should keep under control, otherwise king b2 just gonna happen and the pawn is gonna get promoted. Rook f1, okay, so far so good, very good. And here comes another blunder. We know that king c2 should be played, or king c1, and I play king a1. Huge blunder again, the position is lost again, and we know the drill, we know the plan, we know how to win, but again, playing on seconds, you see that even grandmasters, I'm sure that Etienne Bacrot knows these positions very well, but knowing and applying when in time pressure, when you're tired, when it's two different things. In order to be able to apply every single theoretical position that we learn in endgame manuals, so you need to spend hours playing out with some sparring partner hundreds of times those positions, and even then it's not so clear that you'll be able to save it or win them. Okay, bishop a1, king b3, bishop a2, king c2, well, not really in the right direction, because king a3 is still a winning position. Bishop f1, bishop f7 was the move that holds a draw here. Okay, so many mistakes. a3 is a winning move here. He played rook e3, here a3 winning again. And here king b1 holds a draw. So now I play king a1. Yeah, I was insisting on losing this game, but bishop b1 again is a mistake, right? We know that king b1 should be able to hold the game. Yeah, I said should be able to hold the game, and now then I was not so sure about it. Let me just double check if it's true or not, so I don't tell you something. And of course, there is a very easy way to check out all those endgames. It's a table base, endgame table base. So white to move, yeah, king b1 holds a draw, because for some reason after a3, bishop just will get to d5 or f7 or e6, or it doesn't matter where. And if black plays rook h1, it also doesn't really help, but that's what made me worried, because after king b2, actually black is winning. So king b2 is a losing move due to a3, king c2. Yeah, and then I think I analyzed, it's quite hard to believe. I've analyzed this position when preparing this this video, that there's some kind of a very strange plan that I've never seen in endgame manuals, at least this particular position. Well, I don't recall it, of course, I've seen, but you remember me saying at the beginning of this video that with the pawn on a3 and with the bishop keeping this diagonal, it's a draw if the king is in front of the pawn. But here it's not in front of the pawn. And the winning plan starts with the move king c5 here. Surprisingly, king c5 is the winning move. If king b3, then king d4, and king a3 loses due to king c3, and the king is not in the corner. And if you watch a video of mine on chess.com, you'll be able to see, well, I mean, there are different ways here. It's not even necessary to watch this video. It's won quite easily, but it's quite a surprising way to win this endgame. So king c5, and then somehow white is not able to bring the king to a1. So let's play bishop f7, for example. Yeah, there is some kind of a very, very strange plan here for the stronger side. After bishop f7, the rook gets to h7 and then to b7, cutting off this bishop from the a file. That's the winning plan, and again, I've never seen such an idea before in my life. So, but apparently king b2 loses here due to this very strange looking a3 and king c5 plan, but white is able to save the game if he plays king c2. And after king c2, it's a draw. a3, and then any move, d5, e6, f7, g8 gives a draw, because, well, there is no time for those maneuvers. So you see, it can be quite difficult even when we know all those ideas and nuances. But bishop b1 loses, and we know why, because of a3. But in the game, okay, after several more mistakes like this, rook h2, again, lost position, drawn position, it was up and down all the time. But at the end, even though I kept insisting on keeping my king in the wrong corner, my opponent gave up this pawn, even though this position is still quite an easily winning position for him. He could have just waited. Well, I would play rook f1 just to play it safe with all those tricks and exceptions with the rook on the h file, and then play king b3 and then play a2 and win the game. But instead he got tired as well and played a2, and I needed 50 more moves to make a draw, but I was able to play well here. I didn't make any mistakes here. There are some tricks, but as I said, they're quite easily avoided if you know just one trick. I'm gonna show you if black plays king a3, for example. No, let me show. If black plays king b3, then I think it's the only move that loses here. Well, you can always play bishop a2 or bishop c2, we don't really cover those, and bishop f5, but bishop d3 loses here as well, and that's a trick to remember, because after rook a2, king b1, rook d2, it's a double attack, and it's not possible to give a check on this diagonal. So that's why it's very important to move the bishop, so you have this saving check after this maneuver. After rook g2, for example, here I have a possibility to give a check on f7. And it's a draw otherwise. Okay, that was quite a long video. Oh my gosh, I always try to make it short. I always try to make it in less than 10 minutes, and now it's almost 40 minutes. Wow. Okay, so time to end it. Happy end. Happy end. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed it and it's gonna be useful. We really, yeah, one more thing. I almost forgot to make it really, to make it to 40, right? I promised to show you the winning the solution of this very beautiful study. The only winning move here is king to g5, because king h6 is a draw after bishop e4, and king f6 is also a draw. I thought, when I was solving it, I thought that king f6 is also a nice move, but it's not enough to win this game, because the bishop gets to d3, and black just in time to save it. And after king g5, it's lost. You can go over different moves with the bishop, but it's lost because after, for example, bishop d5, rook d4, king goes to h6, and then eventually the rook will get to the 8th rank with a checkmate. And if the bishop goes, for example, to g2, rook g4, a very strong move, and then king h6 and rook d4 wins here. I think it's the easiest way to win here. Okay, that's very beautiful study, and I think it's very nice to end this episode, quite a long episode, with this chess beauty. All the best, and hopefully I'm gonna see you soon, and we're gonna talk about endgames more, and some of my episodes will be under 10 minutes. Take care, all the best, and see you soon.